So I'm Emily Bailey. I'm an associate professor in philosophy and religious studies department in our college, and the recently appointed fellow for instructional technology in this college. I'm also an instructional technology doctoral student in our College of Education. I'm very interested in the intersections of technology and instruction. And this morning, we're very fortunate to have a panel experts in these intersections between instruction and technology, whose collective wisdom, I think, will touch on different facets of those intersections. So I'm excited to hear what they have to say. Our focus this morning is particularly on AI and generative AI like ChatGPT, since that's sort of the hot topic of the moment. And the plan for this morning is to give our panelists a moment to introduce themselves, to move through a couple of questions to kind of get some ideas on the table, and then to leave a healthy chunk of time at the end for Q&A and some discussion. Panelists, I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourselves.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Maureen Barney. I'm the Assistant Director for Faculty Outreach at the Writing Center. And I'm coming to this conversation from the perspective of writing studies and writing pedagogy. And I'm really interested in the ways that AI technology will alter the writing process for not just for students, but for all of us in academic writing.
Thank you, Maureen. Thanks for having me today, first off, and super excited to be with this panel. I'm Tim Culp, Chief Innovation Officer at Mind Over Machines. My role at Mind Over Machines is to help companies, organizations, nonprofits understand what is artificial intelligence and how does it fit into their organizations, and how can they leverage it for better outcomes. We dive deep into the technology, but also very much focus on the humans and all that good, important stuff that makes the technology work. Also, I write fiction with artificial intelligence as a hobby, and so targeting middle grade students with all about how to, what is it, how does it work, how do you use it? So fun stuff.
Thanks, Tim. My name is Dustin Aloksa. I'm an assistant professor at the Computer and Information Science Department. My research is focused on computer science education, and specifically around metacognition, self-regulation, and problem solving. So this is kind of right into my wheelhouse when we have technology that helps us problem solve and helps us write code. So I'm really looking at how students can leverage this for learning and looking at how it might change the discipline moving forward.
So our first question touches on something that you all mentioned, so this is excellent. The first question is, how can AI be used to support cognition?
I want to start. So as the not teacher in this group, I will say, AI is a very fascinating technology from a how do I do something perspective. A lot of times we're looking at AI as the outcomes, but one of the very critical exercises in any artificial intelligence implementation is defining how it works. And so when you are defining how it works, you're diving deep into how should it work? What's the process? How do we make these decisions? And when working with clients in artificial intelligence and automation, one of the most valuable exercises we usually see is people really deeply thinking about what they're doing and why they're doing it for the first time, sometimes ever. Usually we hear, that's how we've always done it. Okay, well, why? Well, I don't, Bob said to do it that way, and Bob hasn't worked here for 30 years, and so this very fascinating deep dive into the why, but that's also the danger of artificial intelligence, that when you have something that you can just spin up and start running with, you don't think about the why, you don't think about what you're doing. And our catchphrase is use AI and automation to do the wrong things faster, if that's how you approach it. So that, I think there's a lot of value in how you think about these systems.
Well, in my classroom, as soon as AI came out, I started doing some studies with my students on how they're using AI, because I'm asking them to use AI to do their assignments. And without any training, and sometimes just a little nudging to get them to use it and to explain how they're using it, why they're using it, again, going to that thinking about what they're doing and why they're doing it. So I'll just read something that one of my students wrote about AI. AI is helpful in learning because it can create study guides and practice questions. It can summarize content, provide solutions to difficult questions and problems. It might be more effective than search engines in answering questions. And overall, it's making life easier, but you can become too reliant on it, and it may sometimes give incorrect answers. So these are all great things for the student to be realizing as they start using this new tool. It's both a benefit and can be a drawback. I've had a couple students realize that they're relying on it too much and not learning enough. But it's like the internet, it's a vast wealth of information that they can tap into and actually design their own learning process and find out how they learn best in using this tool. So it's been really interesting to see how they dive into it.
Yeah, I love the focus here on like metacognitive reflection and thinking about why we're doing things the way we do them, and helping students understand why they're doing things the way they do them. In addition, and I think that fits for my context as well with writing pedagogy. I think another thing that AI can be very useful in with student writing is helping students generate ideas for research, helping them narrow down their topics, identifying connections between seemingly disparate subjects. It can help students get started on difficult writing assignments by helping them brainstorm ideas, connections, and research questions. It is really good at just like encouraging a kind of like deeper dig into a topic that could potentially help students get a lot more engaged in their writing and research work for their classes.
So to kind of build from that, the next question asks us to think a little bit about what the future of generative AI and sources like ChatGPT are as educational tools, and how those technologies could potentially change things in higher education.
Somebody else want to start this then?
I'll start, sure. Yeah, so there's been a history of intelligent tutoring systems, specifically in like math and computer science, where they try to build the persona of the learner. So it's adaptive to that learner and trying to teach them these complex topics and different ways of thinking about the content. This AI is just going to blow those away. And we're soon going to be generating these intelligent tutoring systems focused on a specific discipline for a specific learner, that we can then start capturing like where we think they might start leading towards misconceptions, be able to head those off, and getting towards how it's going to change higher education. I really envision universities being more of an automated tutoring kind of scenario where undergraduates, it's more about accreditation rather than education, because they'll be able to do a lot of education themselves with given the right tools and the right instruction on how to use them. And then at the graduate level, I really see us coming together as almost working on an open source project where you have a bunch of individuals working on the same research area, that they all contribute to that knowledge using these other tools to speak to this broader conversation we're having on that specific topic. So I think universities, the way we're looking at them might change a little bit moving forward.
Yeah, so, I mean, we were talking before the meeting started about the kind of regular panic around student writing and literacy that happens in higher ed with every technological advance. But I think generally speaking, what I have seen and heard in the field of writing studies is more of a measured response, especially from people who are coming from a pedagogy perspective and looking at the ways in which the field has always encouraged faculty to support student writers. None of that advice is really changing in the face of ChatGPT. What is changing is that we have an opportunity to create a writing culture that is more collaborative, an experience where students have an AI brainstorming partner from the beginning of the writing process that can help them explore connections that interest them. And as I said before, might really help them get more engaged and invested in their writing. Now, the panic thing is interesting because, you know, I have heard from a lot of folks, people at TU and people at other institutions, that they're considering eliminating writing assignments from their classes in response to ChatGPT. I think like there's no reason to do that. We don't need to just stop writing altogether. But that to me raises some really interesting questions about the purpose of the writing assignments that we've been giving our students up to now. What benefits do we think students get from producing research-based written work? Are we looking for their creative good ideas? Or are we looking for subject mastery and citation style and error-free prose? John Warner said in an Inside Higher Ed article about ChatGPT recently, what does it say about the kind of work we allow to demonstrate student proficiency when it can be done by an algorithm that literally understands nothing about content? And I think that's a really important question for all of us to ask. You know, it isn't, so in other words, it isn't necessarily writing or writing assignments or student literacy that is in jeopardy right now. I think for the obvious reason that writing is a subjective human art that requires understanding, critical thinking, and synthesis. So while there may be some automated tutoring going, you freaked me out a little bit when you said automated tutoring, I gotta be honest, but while there may be some automated tutoring going on in the STEM fields, I think because of the subjective nature of writing, there's still going to be a need for things like regular feedback, mentoring, some guiding through the writing process that is comes from human people. But I do think that if we fail to transform the way we teach, which we've been talking about in different contexts here, if we fail to transform the way we teach, then I think learning could potentially be in jeopardy, that we don't want to offload learning to machines. We want to make sure that we preserve human learning and start to think about it differently in this new context. So what I hope and what I sort of envision for the future is that higher ed could potentially begin to move away from traditional grading philosophies that are focused on mastery and really shift toward pedagogies that more fully embrace collaboration, exploration, writing to learn. I think these changes would be a really positive development for student writers, but for higher education in general.
So this is really great reflection on higher education. I'll provide a business context. The two check boxes that businesses want with any assignment they give is on time and under budget. That's it. Like, it's not, you know, necessarily that it's a creative idea or that it is a really great idea. It's that it's done and it was cheaper than we planned it to be. And so when we think about humans and people and their role in education or business or anything, you know, what is it? Like, why are we doing these things? What's the value that the human brings to it? It's very much to the point of, if ChatGPT can write this assignment and it's fine, are we really assessing the right things? So one of the things I'd asked the panel here before, we're talking about ChatGPT, and a lot of people use it single prompt. So a prompt is what you put into ChatGPT to get its outcome. And that's not the way to use the tool. That is a very superficial way to use the tool. You should use more like a conversation that you're working with, think of it like a human peer that you're working with. You have to give it context and go from there. The next generation, and keep in mind, ChatGPT just came out and we're talking about the next generation of these tools, is what's referred to as auto GPT, which is self-prompting. So you give it a list of goals, you tell it what its mission is, give it a list of goals, and then say go, and it goes and does those goals. But the thing is, don't fear, don't panic. It doesn't complete any of the goals in all tests that I've ever done with it. But it does do a lot of great, this is what we do. So as an example, I'd ask the auto GPT, create a marketing plan for the following product, highlighting these value propositions to this customer type, go. And so it starts creating a website. It starts creating the marketing, calendar for the social media posts. It starts creating, here's what to say about the product and here's how to do this. And it creates all this stuff. Didn't finish anything, like it didn't save the output. It can save the output, but it just kept crashing and said, didn't get there. But what this really did create was a great list for me to go to somebody and say, here's how to create a marketing plan. Now go and create a marketing plan and challenge what you see here. Don't just go by the script, bring that human magic that you have to this. And that goes for, we're talking about marketing plans. Same goes for writing software. With tools like GitHub Copilot, it can write software for you. You just have to say, oh, create an API endpoint to here, create this connection to there, save storage here. But you as a human have to be able to stitch it all together and make it actually valuable and work. And so I think that's the piece. When we talk about what's the role of education with AI literacy and fact checking, these are critical. I'll use software as just one more example. AI can just pump in all kinds of code as you're writing. But where did that code come from? And do you have the license to use that code? That is a very important question that ChatGPT just kind of doesn't care about. So if you're working for a company building a product and you're using licensed code from another company that you cannot put into this product, and ChatGPT is like, well, here you go, here's your answer. You got a problem. So knowing that literacy is important.
And it helps to think about kind of that intersection with an educational tool, because that's what we're preparing our students to do too, right? To ultimately leave here and go into the workforce in different areas. So that's definitely a consideration. So the final question to present to you ties into, I think, some of the things that you just mentioned, including things like professional sectors. And then we can open things up for questions. So do you think these technologies are better suited for some disciplines than others, or professional areas than others? You're all coming from kind of a different perspective on this, which is great.
Yeah, I'll start. I think that ChatGPT specifically, as the main AI tool that I have interacted with, is pretty bad at certain elements of academic writing. We had a training with the Writing Center tutors a few weeks ago where one of the tutors pointed out that the writing generated by ChatGPT is basically just whole paragraphs of topic sentences, that everything is very surface. It also really confidently declares things that are hallucinated or just like completely made up. We've seen in some tests that we did, not scientific tests, but like trials that we experiments, personal experiments that we did in the Writing Center listserv to see, what kinds of citations would ChatGPT generate if we asked it to create a bibliography on a certain topic. And we found that almost every single one of the citations in the bibliography was completely fabricated. It was like patch written. They were real scholar names, real journal titles, passable sounding article titles, but they don't exist in the world. So I think that when it comes to writing, ChatGPT is not really there yet. And that's one of the reasons I think that the current panic is maybe a little bit overblown. I don't think ChatGPT, right, composing student essays is going to fool very many people. But that isn't to say that it's not useful in the writing process. I think, as I said before, using it for brainstorming, using it to help students find connections, using it as a conversation partner, as Tim pointed out, and instilling some of that human magic. That I love that you said that we still need the humanities perspective and the human magic and the subjective infusion into our academic writing. I don't think that is ever going to go away, but the current tools that we have now are really more useful at the production end of the writing process, as opposed to producing this like end result that is going to be passable or is going to fool somebody.
Yeah, so when I think about roles and careers, disciplines impacted, we're talking about generative AI. There's two sides of the coin. So one side, so in ChatGPT, we're dealing with what's called natural language processing. And natural language processing has really two aspects of it: understanding and generation. And when we're looking at ChatGPT, we are very enamored with the generation part of it. But the understanding part of it is very, very powerful as well. And so I am hard pressed to think of a discipline that will not be changed and impacted by generative AI. And I say that keeping in mind doctors, and it's an example I use all the time. When you go and meet with a doctor, most of their time is doing this on the computer, and then they talk, and then they back to here, then talk and back to here. Microsoft is working on models for understanding where it is recording the conversation that you're having, and it is entering the notes for the doctor as you're meeting. Now the doctor meets with you as a person. There is not a computer between you and the doctor. And this sounds great, assuming everything is secured, locked down, and taken care of appropriately. Other jobs, truck drivers, I use as an example. If you are a truck driver, we hear a lot right now, well, last mile, you'll be okay, because somebody's got to actually pull up to the dock in the port. But with generative AI, there's these concepts called synthetic data, where we can model out infinite volumes of changes and situations to train the vehicles on in a digital environment. And to that computer, that digital environment is just as real as a real environment. So I don't see any careers that aren't going to be impacted here. I definitely think the ability to shine the human magic, using the term again, it's not copyright, feel free to use it. But the ability to shine, this is the magic we're bringing. That's critical. I'll go to fiction writing as a quick. You ask ChatGPT to write you a story. It will write you a story. The story will not have any emotional resonance. It will not have a character arc that really matters. It will not have settings that you can feel. It's just a story, because that's what you asked for. Like, if you really dig into being able to be a master of prompts, and that is going to be, there are already careers being posted for very high salaries to be prompt engineers and prompt librarians. This is a thing. This is a skill to teach. So.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, I absolutely agree with pretty much all of that. The prompt engineer, as I'm teaching students who are learning computer scientists, that is the next skill, is to be able to write prompts well, get the feedback from the computer that you need, and to be able to analyze and understand that so you can put it into practice. And I agree. I think there isn't a single discipline that isn't going to impact dramatically. I will say that right now, as you were saying, it is more difficult to apply to all disciplines, but we will be using these AIs that are specific to different disciplines. They'll be trained specifically on a topic or a discipline, or they'll be able to go out on Google Scholar given a topic, find all the top cited papers, read through them, be able to cite them, be able to write a paper about them. So academically, I think we will definitely get there once we are training specific models for specific disciplines. When it comes to things like writing and art, while I'm not in that discipline, I think we've kind of gotten away from that human magic, and it's about the production, about the artifact that we're creating. But I've always seen art and writing as the process. We do it because we're expressing something, not because we're trying to create something. And I think with AI, it'll allow us to ignore that production side because that's so easy to do, and return to doing it because we love to do it and because we're expressing something. And then we get the emotional resonance, and then we get all that human magic into what we're creating because we want to create, not just because we want to make something to sell. But yeah, there isn't a discipline that I could think of that this won't impact. Construction, nursing, anything, it's going to have a dramatic impact because the benefit of the AI is it takes this large amount of data and sees connections that are very difficult for a human to make. And those connections can be very valuable to make progress in any discipline.
I wanted to just comment briefly on the idea of prompting. There's I made a handout for faculty to kind of like give them some resources to look through in terms of maybe revising writing assignments or helping students work with ChatGPT. And there is a link on my handout to an article that's about teaching students to prompt ChatGPT. So that might be a useful tool for some of you who are thinking about integrating this technology into your teaching.
Yeah, a lot of questions, but I'm sure other folks do too. So we can open things up now for, yes,
I actually have a question. I'm sorry, because I know faculty members are itching at the bit, but the prompting thing rang a bell. And I'm wondering what disciplines will probably excel at that. So with computer science, you already teach students how to create algorithms by pulling that information out of individuals and then translate that algorithm in a code. My guess is the prompting part may be easier for them. But for the other disciplines that teach logic, my guess is prompting is easier for them to kind of bounce into that because the logic is nothing but algorithm creating in computer science. How easy do you think it will be for the disciplines that are not founded in logic, like computer science and philosophy and religious studies, to get to that point? Because you'll have a lot of people left behind the curve, depending on where we're going with this.
Do you mind if I jump in on
Go
that?
ahead.
Go for it.
So there's a logic fallacy that, talking about logic, in your assumption is that prompts are engineering minded. They're not.
Okay.
In fact, when people ask me like, what's the degree of the future? What degree should I get? I say anthropology, number one. Like that is the key skill of technology in the future. Number two is have some business sense, and number three, psychology, understand how people think. Large language models, which is what ChatGPT is trained on language and how people interact in written form. It's getting now to spoken form, but written form mostly. So what you really need to write good prompts is the ability to understand the question you're asking. And so if you're saying, write me a story, you're going to get the outcome of that. But if you know what makes a good story and you ask for that, now you're cooking with gas. Same with if you are asking for, the citations, like is a great example. If it didn't have any reference, it has no context. And so just as an example, so with prompting, really, anthropology skills, the ability to dig in and understand others, because this is an other that we're talking about here, and how to interact and socialize with those others, that's going to be a powerful skill. Any reactions, panel?
No,
Yeah, I want to jump into that a little bit. I agree. I don't think it is about logic per se. It really is about understanding what you're asking and why, and what you're trying to get out of it. I've had students ask about programming concepts saying, oh, explain this using a metaphor. that I might understand.
Yes.
And it's being able to understand what you are missing and what you want to draw from that AI. So it is more about the metacognition and self-regulation to understand what it is you want to get from it, because you can be very specific and you can iterate on a prompt until you get it right also. So I don't think that a particular discipline is going to surpass others. The disciplines that have more metacognition built in might be more useful, but I don't believe that those are necessarily the ones that are derived from logic.
That is awesome. Thanks for the answer, because once people hear the word prompting, a lot of people assume that it is just, that computer science definition of prompting. Thank you.
It's a conversation. You
Yeah.
prompted us for an answer.
Yep. We just did that.
I think that underscores the importance of collaboration, right? I mean, the skill of the future, I think, no matter what degree program a student is interested in, is going to be collaboration. And the more that we can integrate those skills into our teaching, the better off our students are going to be in the future. We have to actively teach them how to collaborate because they've been like, in their
Right.
in their social media bubbles up to now. And so like, how do you interact with people and machine tools and computer programs and colleagues around the world, right? To answer questions and solve problems. I think that is going to be the key.
I've been thinking a little bit about how interacting with AI will change how we interact between people.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
I don't have any idea of what that's going to be, but it's a very interesting dynamic because it's a large language one. We're working from fuzzy language and trying to talk to this artificial being. But if we're training ourselves to do that, to get the correct responses, how are we going to interact with each other?
Yeah, and just adding on this, I think also we're going to see a very significant generational challenge. And not in the normal, like, oh, older people don't know how to use technology. No, older people had a very bad experience with chatbots. And so I hear this all the time as I talk to people, they're like, well, what can I ask it? I'm like, anything. No, but like, what does it know about? Everything. Like it has all this knowledge. So, and then I contrast that to like my daughter, who is 11, but the story I'm about to tell is a few years ago. She was working on homework. She was like, Dad, what is blah, blah, blah? And I was like, no idea, look it up. And she goes, okay, hey, Alexa, what's blah, blah, blah? And Alexa gives her the answer right away. And so, in that exchange, what's really interesting there is she didn't think twice about, I'll just ask Alexa, it's right here. Like, why would I literally get up out of my chair, go to the computer, go search for this, sort through all the results, find the reference that I need. I'll just ask Alexa what the answer is. Now, the skill we need to develop is, was Alexa right? Did Alexa answer that question appropriately? And that's where, I think we're going to see in younger audiences who grew up with Alexa and Siri and all these, we're going to see more and more just natural, these digital people are just people. Just like
Or we go
wrestlers.
open an almanac and see if we can find it.
We do have a question from the audience. Karen Donica Massini. Karen Donica, go right on ahead, Karen.
Hello, thank you. This is great. I'm glad to be hearing all this. So my reflection is the difference between a lower level class and an upper level class. So like in my lower level class, which is mixed majors, a core course, they have, a book analysis writing assignment. And the first thing I cover is, hey, wherever ChatGPT, wherever it can help you, let it help you, right? But let's talk about what this assignment is, because this is not a book summary. This is not a, and again, and all students like engaged immediately. They knew what I was talking about. And we kind of like dove in that, a lot of family science is not necessarily reinventing the wheel, but understanding how people interact, everything that you've already said. Went into my upper level class, and this was honestly, like after midterms, it came up in my upper level class because it's, kind of a 2-part kind of course. And by then it was out for so much longer. I just assumed these upper level students would know what I was talking about, and they're getting ready to do their big projects. And I think this programming is fantastic for a policy analysis because there's so much you have to weed through and so much fact checking that you need to do. And I always say, don't reinvent the wheel. Your job is to comb through it and find out what's real, right? No one knew what I was talking about. They all immediately pulled out their phones and started, searching the term. And I thought, you're talking about generational. And I was a little bit flabbergasted by the fact that in like a social science, psychology, like family science is interdisciplinary. My upper level students like, what are you talking about? What's that? I'm like, are you in the ground? Like, where are you? So I just wanted a reflection on that because, like I said, the other class was very much all different majors and things. And it was just, it almost blew me away. We had to pause. I had to pull it up. I had to kind of say, we've been talking about fact checking. We've been talking about knowing sources. Like, how do you not know this is happening? So I just wanted to hear your response.
Yeah, so I'll chop that question into 2 parts. So one part is around a topic that came up. I was talking with another educational group, and they were like, well, how can we, how can we make sure that ChatGPT is not being used? That was their particular perspective. But as far as the knowing, what ChatGPT is, I still meet with companies, large companies, that the question they start with is, what is artificial intelligence? Like, and how does it apply here? So when we have this perception that everybody is so far down the line with AI and man, it's running everything. It is running significant, things at Microsoft, at Apple, at Google, at Meta, at, these tech companies. They are not the bar. Like, that is not the norm. Most companies are still in the, what do we do with this thing kind of phase. So I'm not surprised that you have people that are like, I haven't heard about this. What is going on here? The other aspect I'd say is, one of the key things when it comes to the human aspect, if you're not aware of Van Halen's Brown M&M policy, I would encourage you to check it out. So Van Halen, for those who are not aware, the rock band from the 80s, but apparently kept going. They had a stipulation in their contracts that there were no brown M&Ms allowed backstage, none. And this was written off when it happened as like, oh, these guys are just being divas, like it's ridiculous. But Van Halen had very, very specific measurements that they needed for the light and sound of the studios, in the stages that they worked on. And what they didn't have time for before a show was to go check everything. So they made one obvious thing that they could just walk in, see it's not done, and say, we've missed it. So that they didn't follow what they were supposed to do. So I do encourage, from an assignment perspective, if you need brown M&Ms, reflect on what they are and inject them into the assignment. But this is the AI literacy aspect going forward. So
It's also, it hasn't been out for a year yet, and we've already been through a couple revisions of AI. It's starting to impact people's lives more and more. The newer students are probably the most prone to want to go out and find those easy answers. So they're going to find AI first. The ones that are more focused on learning, maybe they're not doing that research to try to find the easy answers, and they're actually trying to learn. So that may be what you're seeing also. The upper division classes may be just more interested in your content and not looking for just some answer they get off the internet. So it might be a blessing in that way.
So I do have a question is about, the presumption of you have about the students. It seems like you envision students would be self-disciplined, independent, and already have the critical thinking skills that knows, okay, that should be the place I stop and rely on my self-reflection to do it. But I'm just worried, like just envision nowadays, probably most students already have this kind of sense. But just envision like 10 years later, if there is new generation of the students who are still in the probably primary school, middle school, but who had already get addicted to use these kind of things. So example, like ask AI to review the literature. But if another thing I think we also assumed is creativity is something natural. But it's not, right? The creativity or critical thinking is something that you needed to be developed. And by doing some very, very dull things, like reading these articles authored by others. And if we just ask the AI to do this kind of very, very dull parts, I'm wondering, where students develop this kind of creativity in their end.
Well, I mean, my response to that is to say, well, of course, we have to teach students these skills. We have to teach all these skills. The students aren't going to just automatically come to us knowing how to think critically or how to evaluate sources or synthesize things. And I think that down the line, it may be the case that AI programs get really good at writing literature reviews. And so if that does come to pass, then I think, like you're saying, we need to maybe determine that isn't one of the brown, that's like not the M&M we want, and stop assigning it. Instead we could assign research-based projects that not only encourage or require creativity, but teach students or give them an experience that helps them understand the role of creativity in your discipline. So that might be something like a data visualization project that communicates clearly to a specific audience some important finding in your field. Or it might be an infographic assignment. There was a really successful assignment last semester in a criminal justice class that we had some writing fellows embedded in, where the students created infographics. And it was a wonderful creative assignment alternative to traditional research writing. The students still had to do research. They still had to generate an understanding of source material. They still had to create a bibliography of the materials that they consulted, but the end result, the deliverable that they're turning into their professor is a creative, colorful, visual artifact. And so I think there are a lot of ways that we can encourage and require creativity. And I think most of those ways are going to involve probably a gradual, but hopefully not too gradual, shift away from traditional academic research papers.
One thing I also encourage is, and I see this, and it is very frustrating to me, because I think to this point of creativity in the future and critical thinking in the future, the idea that if the AI made it, that's not creative, nor is it thinking. It just spit out a bunch of other stuff. This is where we really need to be careful on that narrative, and saying, okay, well, what is the human magic applied? What is the creativity? Because the AI did not just spontaneously vomit forth information. You had to ask it for something. You had to create the prompt to do this. And so as we think about creativity, that if a student, and I see this in my daughter's middle school classes, where they're saying, Mr. Tim, what is ChatGPT and how can we use that? Or say, what's Midjourney? Midjourney is a AI art tool. And I want to do a character portrait of my Dungeons and Dragons character. How do I do that in Midjourney? Okay, now we take that and say, okay, well, why don't you draw that? Like, you can draw that on a sketchbook, or trace it, or build up these skill sets, or what else could you do with that in Photoshop? So I think there is an opportunity for us to leverage AI in the creative process and really take it further. We have to take people down that path. Otherwise, it's easy, right? Just type this in, pop.
So connecting to middle school teachers, it was a conversation that that I had with a middle school math teacher this winter that helped me conceive of how I could use some of these tools in the courses that I teach, especially the ones that are the core 9 advanced writing, right? I had a little bit of that, oh my gosh, what happens now, right? And it was a middle school math teacher who said, remember when, and I don't quite remember when, but she said, remember when the graphing calculators came out and everybody thought, oh, great, here it goes. Nobody has to do math anymore, right? And there was a big pushback to graphing calculators in the 80s. I think I was a little bit too young, but whatever, that's another story. The concern was that students wouldn't have to do the math, right? But what we've seen is that what she reminded me was that students still have to do the math. They just have this tool to help them do it better. And through the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s, there was a deeper understanding of mathematical principles and theories that now gives us the opportunity to teach math and public and private education in lots of different ways, right? So now in middle school, instead of thinking about math, or I should say middle school experiences, maybe ending with pre-algebra if a student is advanced, now they're thinking about like pre-trigonomic principles, stuff that some of us as parents didn't see at all in high school, sometimes maybe 12th grade, right? And so this idea of a graphing calculator in the 80s freaking everyone out, leading to a cohort of young people today with advanced mathematical skills that we ourselves didn't have, is the way that I'm trying to absorb these kinds of AI tools, right? If we can teach people how to use them as a kickoff point, what kinds of things could we have 20 and 30 years from now that are enhanced, that are better framed, that are, deeper, not to be all bionic, but right, but faster, stronger, better, right? If we use ChatGPT and other AI tools, almost like a graphing calculator, right, as a place to start, but we still need to have those theoretical principles and understandings in order to use it well. And so this conversation with the math teacher helped me feel less freaked out about it and prompted me to shift the brown M&Ms in my writing requirements, right? Like where are the places in the rubric that the tool can't just generate something? Where's the reflective thinking? Where's the critical pieces that lead to content that is outside of, the internet? Thinking about how what gets, spit out connects to what we're teaching and learning in the classroom, and whether or not it's fact-based is really rich discussion. And it's things that you have to make space for. I've had to cut other things in my classes, but things that have happened this spring, conversations that we've had that we've never had before. And it's really cool. It can be really cool. And so I'm speaking from a place of like, I was spooked, and an 8th grade math teacher unspooked me, and now I feel better. So there we go.
I want to jump in and maybe spook you a little bit again. Only because when we introduced calculators and allowed them in classrooms, our ability to do mental math as a country went on the decline. So going back to maybe the creativity, there can be a reliance on too much of this. But creativity is about perspective. So if we can do things that's like, okay, how does this relate to your life? Or how can you use some empathy to reach someone else's life? But I agree that using a powerful tool to get past those initial hurdles allows us to really explore those deeper, more complex things that will help advance technology, advance society, and interpersonal communications.
Just curious about the digital literacy unevenness. Especially in the classroom, what if in the future we have a very mixed students who have already developed this kind of literacy and those who are poorly developed? How we are going to address that issue?
Collaboration.
Yeah, and I would take the words "what if" off of that. It is going to happen, like absolutely. And again, I'll use again my daughter and her friends. They come over. We literally are playing with hologram computing and mixed reality and artificial intelligence tools in our house. They're going to be ahead when they walk into a computer, into an environment, and somebody says, "Use technology to solve this." So how do we address that? And we need to, again, not just in our classrooms. I mean, socially, this is a much bigger problem than I think people really realize. We talk about digital divide. We say, yes, this is a big problem. this is a crisis because as we go further, you're going to have people so far left behind that there's going to be a whole new level of poverty of people that not only don't have the jobs, but can't have the jobs. So not to be a doomsday sayer.
But I think just to twist that a little bit more toward a positive light, I think that, we already have contexts in which we have some students who are wildly unprepared for the work that we're asking them to do, and other students who are very well prepared, right? All in the same class. And so I would turn to writing center pedagogy, which has been, demonstrably effective for a really long time, ever since the open enrollment movement in the 70s. We start pairing peers, one peer who is more skilled, another peer who is maybe struggling in some specific way, and they help each other. And so I imagine a scenario where people feel more welcome and useful and incorporated into classrooms, because they're not just there to get some credential or like clock some credit hours, but they're there to really create community and support their peers and create a learning environment that is more robust and collaborative.
And I think AI is going to become so ubiquitous and powerful that even if someone is introduced to it later in their life, they don't have the upbringing or they don't have the technology access. When they do get it, the AI can still interact with them at their level and can continue helping build them from where they're at currently. So I think it's still going to be a powerful tool to catch everybody up because it's always going to start from their own conversational skills, their own creativity, their own curiosity. So if we can make that happen.
Yeah, if we prioritize that.
Right.
And that's where, again, as we think about, one time and under budget, and so how can we move as fast as possible to get going? And this is a moment in time for us to say, what do we want to have out of these tools? And so, I think the catching up, but I know there's been a hand up multiple times.
I think to your last point, and I'm skeptical, so I'm coming at from a different lens. What do we want? The fact is, we don't have a say. These are tech companies who are running full speed ahead, deciding on what to do with this, right? There's no regulation, and there's our arms race, so to speak. This is an illusion that we have something to say about this. We're talking about how to use something that's already given to us. And the language I'm using around this about they don't know anything. They're predictive language models. I think we need to sort of develop a more critical language to talk about the technology, but also to understand the greater sort of economic profit sort of reality that this technology is being thrusted upon us. I think we're sort of biting it at the margins, so how are we going to make good with this, how are we going to work this? But the fact of it is that we don't have a say on how these things work. Neither seems the government is willing to do anything about it. There are no guardrails. There are executives in AI say that there's a 10% existential threat to the planet, but because of this technology, I'm not a doomsday guy, but they're saying it, they know it better than I do. We should be sensitive to that. There's an underside to this that I think we need to take on a bit more critically. That's sort of a real danger.
Yeah, I absolutely expect by the end of this year, we are going to see a lot of AI regulation. We're already seeing in Europe the AI Act, which is trying to tackle some of these accountability aspects. The lawsuit that the EU has with OpenAI right now, I think is going to yield some very interesting results where the EU is saying, you need to take these people out of your algorithms. And OpenAI is like, oh, that's not how this works. We can't.
Right. Most of them don't know how it works.
So, that's
it's the data that you feed to it.
Yeah.
Right, but but the AI will get to a point where it can to it itself.
Yes, deep
So
learning.
the people who program won't know what it is doing.
Right, and so this is where we do have a lot we can do about this. And from my perspective, and maybe I'm naive and an optimist, but you know, a couple things are we can support open source projects. So there's a company called Hugging Face that just released an open source clear box large language model to say this is how it works. You have visibility into how this works, and we can say that's what we want to be using. And so we vote with our dollars. You know, I'm not going to use Microsoft Office anymore. I'm going to use systems that implement this, or I'm going to work with companies that are using, you know, Llama from Meta, or whatever. You know, the other aspect of this is we do need to wake up our government and say, yeah, we got a problem here. And if you watched any of the congressional hearings with either TikTok or Facebook with Mark Zuckerberg, it was embarrassing to see like the people asking the questions had no concept of how the internet works, much less how social media works. And now we want them to be able to address how the future technology is going to go. So I would encourage you to support organizations like AI for Good and be very involved with them. They have some fascinating projects going on. And, you know, be out there saying, we have a problem. You know, again, why am I here? You know, like I'm here to talk to you about what's really going on out there. Because we do have like tech companies saying, okay, we're going to push this stuff out there. But a lot of businesses are still saying, what is this thing and how do we use it? And they're starting with, how do we use this without getting sued? You know, and so that's not a bad, you know, self-serving, but not a bad place for us to talk about ethical frameworks and bias.
Yeah, the concerns weren't really the focus of the talk today, but there are a lot of them.
Yes.
The technology is out there and fairly well known as to how it does what it does. Not necessarily what the outcome is or why that's the outcome. It's all statistical, autocomplete essentially. And it's really about the data that you're training it on. Data is, as we've seen from social media, where all the power is. So if you can collect your own data, you can already have something on your own hard drive that can do these models. As long as you have enough processing power and enough data, you can get something very powerful. So we do have some say, and I think legislatively and how we as people kind of push this technology forward, we have some say, but I agree with you that there is a lot of concern, especially that OpenAI started as open source and then gets funded by Microsoft. And now it's a business. So there are lots of concerns, but because there are multiple players that have this race, we have a lot of access to a lot of things also. So if it doesn't completely take over, then I think we have a lot of ways that we could use and help shape where this goes.
And I just want to say, I have to go to another meeting, but I have a QR code on the computer there, if you could share it. On the. Andrew will help. Okay, thanks, Andrew. The QR, yeah, there's the QR code. And this code will take you to a handout that I made with resources for faculty about creating assignments, and there's some other links at the bottom that are relevant to a lot of the things we've been talking about today. But thanks so much for you.
Thank you to everyone who came today and to our panelists. Really.